So we're here with Mission Digital, lovely UK-based DIT and dailies and digital lab services company, and it's very privileged for me to be hosting this discussion this evening on storytelling and ACES. Very kind of you to spend your evenings with us. Very dry technical subject, take you away from your friends and family for the evening. We're going to try and keep this relatively short, but I suspect it's going to be heading towards the 2 hour mark. But bear with us, it's going to be interesting, I think. So if, like me, you've been hearing ACES or you've been involved with ACES, and if even more like me, you've just pretended you really knew what it meant so that the cool post guys like you, I'm just kidding, there are no cool post guys. I'm even kidding about that, there's loads. Well, this is the conversation for you. I was just starting my first sort of fully ACES project when the badness happened. So I got a little bit of a taste of it, but far from an expert. So fortunately, I am joined by two experts. Later on, we're going to be hearing from Pablo Garcia, who's the head of digital imaging at Mission Digital. He worked for many years as a colorist, both on set, near set color, and in post facilities. He also worked at Sony doing training and development on 4K and HDR. He also was really involved in this brilliant Sony Venice camera. So we've got all kinds of technical link-ups going on, which is why there's a slight delay, as well as my abs workout to get going. So hopefully we're going to be able to bring you some live links to Pablo's Resolve setup and the waveform monitors there, and you can get into a bit more technical detail about exactly how ACES works. So I'm going to hand over in a second, and we'll talk a bit more about the detail of ACES, but it's the Academy color encoding system, and it is a framework that's free and available to use. It's being used in many productions, and it aims to solve a whole bunch of problems and potential messes in taking your intent all the way through from shoot all the way through to delivery and even archival. But to talk more about exactly how this all works, I'm going to hand over to the wonderful Geoff Boyle, NSC, fantastic cinematographer, working for many, many years, many, many beautiful commercials, TV dramas, many feature films, and everyone on the internet obviously knows him as the host of the cinematography mailing list, and the many camera tests that Geoff has selflessly organized and put up online for us all to compare the best camera packages. So over to Geoff for a little bit of a description on the problems that ACES is intended to help with.
Well, it's I've been doing this a long time, and in 2005 I shot my first fully digital film, digital shoot, digital post, and my reaction was, what the not allowed to use that word, because it had all gone to hell. I had no control anymore. And I want to jump back to mid-80s when I was shooting high-end commercials on film. We were printing them on film. They went to a lab. They were processed in a standard way. There were standards. They were processed at a constant speed. We knew what we were doing. We knew there was a standard printer setting, which in theory was 25 across, 25, 25, 20, was your base light. The base light varied from lab to lab and stock to stock, but as long as you knew what it was and you had your material printed at that, if it looked bad, then it was you had screwed up. If it looked good, you were fine, and you could calibrate your Polaroid camera to match what you were getting off the film. You could do Polaroid references on your shoot, and you knew that if the Polaroid looked right, the print would look right. They telecine off a print. You didn't have colorists then. You had telecine engineers who just tried to match the print. And then if we can change slides, thank you. We then moved to scanning from the neg. Sorry, I've got a little notes down there. And it was the first time we started to get colorists rather than engineers. But the problem there was that you also still had engineers who would just, yeah, we'll have a bit of tweak of that, and your result would be nothing like what you intended. I had a South Bank show, which we spent forever getting to look warm when we shot it. And when it was being transmitted, the guys in the central apparatus room decided to neutralize it. They got an obscene phone call direct from me. But The thing was that if your rushes didn't look right, you could always ask for a standard, recognize that word, telecine alignment film from Kodak. And if they lined the telecine up to that, you then put your film on it. If it looked good, it was good. If it looked bad, it was bad. It was great. You knew where you were. Next slide, please. You could then line up your digital stills camera to match what was on the telecine. The stills that you're seeing now are direct out of a Canon Rebel that were shot in Bangkok when I was doing Street Fighter. They're not graded. They were just taken out of camera. The settings of contrast, brightness, and whatever on the camera had been adjusted to make it look like the rushes that we'd accept, you know. And they were both ways. It was great. And then next slide.
Coming.
And then 2005, we went totally digital, and the world went to. And what did we get? We didn't know. We had no standards, no references. Everything was adjustable by everybody. Is it right? Well, we put a standard LUT on it, so it must be right. Standard LUT. I did a workshop in Amsterdam where I showed 12 standard LUTs. There were standard LUTs from 12 different post houses, and they all looked different. What standard is there? What are you shooting? You don't know. And then in 2015, I discovered ACES, a bit before that, but that's when I started to get heavily into it. And I realized that it was manufacturer independent. We should be on, sorry, I should have said change slide. It was manufacturer independent. It was a standard. It worked with any display. It was free. And it was not from any manufacturer. That was the really important thing for me. Next slide. The visual intent was preserved. You could show people what you wanted. They knew. They just put standard ACES settings on, and that was what you got. It was wonderful. You had more time to grade because you put the standard ACES look on it, and you had a basic look. You didn't have to set a base grade to start with, a technical grade. So you had much more time to actually do a creative grade. It was great. There was consistency. You could deliver to multiple different formats, and it was the same. It looked the way you intended. I loved it. You could handle VFX, and that was a big one for me because I was doing a lot of VFX work, and it was always a nightmare in post, getting it to match what you wanted, what you intended it to look like, what the rest of the bloody film looked like. And next slide. And now I think, as I used to say in the L'Oreal commercials I did, it's time for the science.
Let's crack on with Pablo and some actual knowledge of what ACES is. Thanks, buddy.
Right. So this has got a big chunk. So we've learned how visual art also suffers from age. We can see it in many works exhibited in museums, in ancient churches, and in noble palaces. To restore them to their ancient splendor, restorers, with the help of technology and their personal skills, are committed to apply increasingly advanced techniques to try to get what the artist intended. The serious danger is not knowing how to keep these works in their original quality. One of the factors that most influences conservation is color, because of the great creative power. Leonardo da Vinci was a painter, sculptor, architect, engineer, and scientist. He was obsessed with the search of relationships between colors and how to create unique mixtures of pigments and chemicals. Despite his great fame as a genius, his works are rather unfortunate. The most famous work, the Cenacolo of the Last Supper that we can see here, was his first large-scale experience on the fresco technique. Leonardo, not satisfied with the chromatic limitations of typical of this technique, developed a new oil and egg white mixtures that could resist dry lime. His efforts gave sublime results that the chronics tell how the vibrant colors and bright colors made it a unique work of its kind. although he managed to give strong emotions with color to his contemporaries, we haven't been lucky enough to appreciate them in all their splendor, and we will never be. Already, few years after Leonardo's death, the color of the natural painting began to degrade, thus leaving it in the uncertain memory of some reporters, like this Giambertino that I'm going to show now. If I can manage to change this. That should be, okay, there you go. Ta-da. This is a copy done on the time that the fresco was finished. That shows, this is done in canvas. This is not done on lime. And this shows the actual colors that the original painting had when Leonardo was still alive. Despite his young age, the image in the art of cinema ages badly, or in the worst case, is lost. Only few have spent their energy and knowledge in preserving the works that helped create. The Academy heard and purpose its long-term archiving. Using ACES, future-proofs digital content and enables it to repurpose in perpetuity, assuming that adequate digital data management is in practice, obviously, for even higher quality distribution channels to come. Even today, when any ACES formatted archive material is being incorporated into new projects as flashbacks or in sequels, the preparation time for that archive material is greatly reduced. As images progress through a conventional workflow, the range of color decreases from capture to delivery. Large color spaces like ACES maintain maximum image quality until conversion for intended viewing formats. In this graph here, we can see basically what is the core of working within an ACES framework that maintains quality through the whole production, post-production, and archive, and it only changes for distribution purposes. Now, we're going to move into color science through history. In the Renaissance, the use of color paintings assumed a fundamental role. The artist went in search of the best raw materials to produce them. Towards the second half of the 15th century, Venice was the largest naval commercial power, and the best pigments from the most remote places in the known world could be found on this spot. Often, the artists purchased pigments to produce their own colors with complex formulas secretly kept and handed down in their workshops. Many specialized in the production of color and began to offer their mixtures to the artist. It is said that the Florentine monks of San Giusto della Mura were famous for their ability to prepare in colors. Among their loyal customers were Da Vinci, Michelangelo, and Botticelli.
I actually tried to get some free color from the Florentine monks and for my own stuff, and I'm promising them that when I get a big Bond movie, I'm going to come back to them for the full color. Yeah,
bring it out to us, and we can build a lot for you. So basically, ACES aims to do the same. ACES provides a set of mathematical concepts and best practices that enable reliable, high-quality, interchange of color content between cameras, digital processing systems, software applications, and display. Rather than defining workflows, ACES provides a common set of components that can be used to design them. Built at first quality color system capable of being faithfully reproduced. But above all, a creative tool for artists, a container in which to draw one's brush and give space to one's work.
So that's really important, isn't it, Pablo? Because I think there's an idea out there that there's an ACES look that, it's a drop-down menu. You click onto ACES mode, and then it suddenly looks a certain way. But that's not right. It's not. There's no inherent look to it. What you're describing is a framework in which anything can occur, but that's about maintaining the fidelity of your intention.
Yes and no. There is a base look in ACES, which is not really intended to replicate any film emulsion or anything like that. Basically, there has to be a certain base look. It's has we will see later, has a kind of a filmic response as well on highlights. It tends to desaturate highlights and so on. But it's not really, you can use it out of the box. And actually, Geoff has in his website and all of these base ACES looks for all the camera manufacturers, isn't it? Geoff, do you have that?
Yeah, we have.
Geoff's gone very Sin City over there. I love it.
Yeah, I decided to do the. I set up this for certain lighting conditions, and the sun decided.
This is the ACES look, everyone. Yeah, it's just black and white. That's all we're talking about. Really complicated black and white.
Really simple black and white. The color was to hell. I can't do this in ACES, so I thought I'll stick to mono. Yeah, on CML there's all kinds of resources for ACES. All very simple lookup tables to play with. There's control files and so on.
So
have a look.
Yeah, so basically there is a base look, but it's not really an artistic look. Let's put it that way. It at least looks somehow visible. You know, it's not just.
I mean, I would say it rolls the highlights off.
Yeah.
It puts a bit of a toe in the shadows. There used to be, at the first versions, there was a much stronger look to it, and it's been removed and removed and removed generation by generation. It's much more neutral than it was.
But we're going to talk a lot about looks in ACES, but that is for not so long, but a little bit further down the line. So if I can continue, we will move on to the next slide, because we've been talking about the 15th century. And I would like to move now on to the 17th century, which is when color became the subject of scientific study. Let's say that could be the start of color science. Sir Isaac Newton was a mathematician who dealt with optics during 1770 and 1772, and observed how light can be broken into different colors by chromatic dispersion by passing a white ray through a prism. He then hypothesized light as a corpuscular entities by dividing it into 7 main primary components compared to the 7 notes of the musical scale: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. Newton's theories of optics became a cornerstone of science to which everyone had to rely blindly. And in the years to come, a succession of painters, entomologists, and chemists developed chromatic models following Newtonian theories. This is what we call the physics of light. And now we're going to move into a second way of perceiving light, because one thing is how light is created, which is what Newton was studying, the physics of light. And there's the other end. It's like how humans perceive it. And that happened 100 years after the birth of Newton's austere law on color. A poet, writer, and playwright theater the same matter, refuting his reliability. Goethe, passionate about natural science and visual art, wrote a book that many cinematographers and many color enthusiasts have or should read on color theory only on the basis of human perception. First, Goethe questions the relationship between the visual system and memory. The intuitions of these 2 great men have paved the way of what modern men of science and artists have known, and which today are part of our knowledge of color. Until now, where the neuroscience reflects the avant-garde in the field of processing between ink and mind. This is very important because in color science, there's always 2 ends of the scope. One is how things are created, how light is created, how light is captured by optics, and how it is displayed to us. We will see this a little bit down the line, but these are the core of color science: physics of light and perceptual light. So physics versus perceptual. It is fascinating how to think that Newton and Goethe, although apparently at odds with the theory, would be enthusiastic about a thing like ACES, which covers both. A single unique color language that offers creative tools to allow each artist to show his or her vision in the most accurate way possible to the spectator, despite the time, the place, and the technology. Cinema, as a young art, needs to be preserved over time, but also to be perceived correctly over time. Image capture or image creation tools, projection or video display systems don't always use the same color parameters, and they are likely to interpret color images differently. And this might place inherent limits to its own future. That's the core of any color managed workflow. ACES provides a standardized set of transforms that made this simpler and, more important, predictable, as Geoff pointed out before. I was talking about the relationship between physics and perceptual. And this is probably the most common and easier example, which is a basic of light encoded in color science, which also divides between perceptual and linear. As you all know, in an 18% gray card will reflect only the 0.18 of the light that hits it. So we do not perceive in a linear way. Our brain interprets low luminance at a really fine detail because it's called also mid-gray. That's on the perceptual edge. We perceived that gray to be between black and diffuse white, but its physical capability or his physical condition is actually only the 18% of whatever light is actually hitting that gray patch. ACES in its core is based in linear light, in physics of light, and uses logarithmic encodings to ease of operation, is using a perception mode, which we're going to see later on. There is a way of relating one to the other, and is using mathematics. And this is something that we were discussing yesterday in our rehearsal with Ed. There are mathematical relationships between linear light and perceptual light, which lead us to all of these log encodings and these curves that many of you have seen in marketing, or if there's any color enthusiasts, curves is what we work with and what we deal with. And there are most of the time a relationship between, a mathematical relationship between linear light and perceptual light. Ed, how are we doing in questions so far?
Oh, we're doing good. I think everyone's wrapped in your discussion of art history and taking us so. Please continue.
Or they're all gone because of our technical difficulties?
No, there's plenty watching. We're loving it.
Okay. Well, that's very good to hear. So, as I said, ACES in its core is based on linear light. It captures photons, or it encodes photons of light. But we have different ways of working within this work frame. And these are the acronyms. There's going to be loads of acronyms, the ACES transforms and etc. There are plenty of acronyms. So we're going to try to make them more familiar to you on this seminar. We have ACES CC, which is a logarithmic color encoding that optimizes ACES for color correctors. ACES proxy is a variation of ACES CC, but it was designed for use on onset, mostly for usage through HDI cabling. So basically it's based on 10-bit. I forgot to say that all the core of ACES, it's always 32-bit floating. Linear light is should be always managed in 32-bit floating for these mathematical transforms.
Yeah, it's fair to say that the ACES space is just ridiculously huge. You know, if your super, 8K HDR project is the Ark of the Covenant, it's being delivered into the gigantic warehouse at the end of Raiders. And the gigantic warehouse is the is the ACES color space. So it's been designed to have enough room for not only like current digital capture, but film scans, VFX, even game studios are using ACES in one stage. So you've got this gigantic space that's in no way going to kind of damage your image. And in that space, you can do what you choose.
Yeah, indeed. So it can be used technically for anything that is image creation. So VR, VFX, video games. You can find it in Photoshop as well. For everything that is basically image creation, which is going to be intended to be displayed either on projection or on a computer screen or whatever the future brings.
And someone's asking about what's a floating point. That's just about the precision, isn't it, of the maths?
Yes, that would need its own seminar, and it's basically
it's we're going to say it's good.
it is good. Yeah, it's about how the calculations are made. So you got 8-bit, 10-bit, 16-bit, and 32-bit. So 32-bit is what is called floating point. 16-bit is called half floating, and then you have the rest of the bit depths to calculate. There's a lot of information out there in Wikipedia, but it's basically just have 100% mathematical concepts. And I could give this on to Tom Mitchell, our
let's not
technical director.
I think that's good. I think we can move on. I think it's just to say that it's just a way of making sure that the maths involved in this whole system.
It's precision. It's precision on the mathematical calculation, basically.
Yeah. Great.
So we then move on to the most up-to-date lighting coatings that are used commonly in, I would say, the 90 very long % of the projects. I haven't done any single project in ACES yet. There was a slight ACES was created through or after feedback from colorists to the academy, because it was a little bit hard to, especially when you are operating the knobs for low lights, it tend to crush the blacks quite fast. Basically, it was a quantization thing, and then it was a toe was added to the curve, which you can see here in the graphic between the difference between CC and CCT. Actually, the T of CCT stands for toe, and this gives a more predictable result when you're operating the controls in any color corrector. It's more similar to a traditional Cineon curve, that they all have this toe in the variant. And then we have ACES-CG, which is also linear. But if you see ACES-CG, it's meant to be operated by VFX or for CG only, which basically it means that it's using a smaller color space, but always using linear light, because CG softwares, they are generating light. So intrinsically, they operate always in linear light because they are generating physics. And then they're putting that into a screen for us to see it. And then that's the transformation between that physics and perceptual, as we were seeing before. That's how it operates. As ACES is a linear representation of the scene light, it matches what your light meter reads. One stop mode of light is a doubled ACES value. So concentration for the set translate directly into ACES, keeping all the color and dynamic range that the camera could capture. Then let's talk about color or gamuts. ACES is defined by two color spaces. The first of them is AP0, which basically is the smallest set of primaries that encloses the whole CIE standard observer spectral locus. So it's a very big triangle, but it's only that big so it can embrace what humans can see. And this is the core of the framework. It's meant to be used for archive, and it's where all the basics of the mathematical calculations happen. But for working as a work frame and for ease of operations and making the maths easier, we have what is called the AP1. AP1, it's well contained within the CI standard, And this is because DI systems have traditionally been designed to work with low color spaces and more constrained color and dynamic range. So as a result, color encoding directly from the ACES AP0 or ACES 2065-1 images felt unfamiliar to colorists in how the trackballs, knobs, and rigs were operating, because they were programmed to work in more legacy encodings. As color corrector manufacturers update their softwares for ACES, ACES provides an additional working color space to accommodate colorists and color operations. ACES CC, ACES CCT, and ACES CG use AP1. This is very important.
Just to reply to some of the people in the chat, so we're definitely going to end up, we're getting well into the weeds on some of the really technical stuff on this, which I know some of you are really interested in. From a DP point of view, I'm even super nerdy me is probably not going to need to know some of this stuff. It's interesting to see how it all kind of works behind the scenes. But one thing that I have heard people mention with ACES before is that you can just get into kind of strange situations with really bright, you know, very saturated sort of neon colors. You can get clipping and kind of a strange look that seems to come up a lot. I mean, is that something that can be addressed?
Yeah, and actually that's the first example that we're going to jump into.
What a massive
resolve. But yeah, that's I've had the same with some cinematographers, especially knowing that in their production design there's going to be neons included within the on the set and so on, and they've heard of, they have experiences before and so on about the neon problem of ACES. It's a little bit hard to explain, but I'm going to try to make it as easy as possible. The mathematical reason why that it's nowadays is on the way to be addressed for ACES 2.0. There's a full working group talking about gamut mapping and how to solve any other this problem and any other one about how to map colors from a scene referred way of capturing, how to move from physics to perceptual. That's where the error or the problem, which is easily to address. And with no further delay, I'm going to move into results. Let me just change here. And you should see now my resolve layout. So we have a couple of shots here, which we're going to use for explaining, which they have this is without a fix. So this is how the material will come into, or would look into ACES, which can maybe put down some cinematography like, oh yeah, but I've seen it, and you have all of these things, and I'm going crazy because I think that this is a problem of the whole thing, or is my camera doing it wrong, and so on. Now this is an inherent problem of or issue that ACES has been, the Academy has been addressing. And I'm going to show you a first way and the easy fix that is being provided by the Academy. There is a fix for this that everybody can use out of the box. It's built into Resolve. And I think it's built in most of the color correctors nowadays, which is is based on an LMT, which we're gonna explain later on, and it's called the neon fix. Shouldn't be added in here. Is not a node. It should be always applied on the clip level, just for those queries of or Resolve users, and it looks like this. For some situations like this one in particular, I find it a little bit aggressive, but this is a very easy way to address it on set, unless you have created with your colorist a gamut mapping to move from that physical light into the perceptual light and deal with these super bright and super saturated colors that are very hard to mathematically move from one place, from AP0 to AP1. That's basically where the mathematical error is happening. Is this is a way to address it. But your colorist, or even you at home, you can create by gamut mapping and so on. I could show you more or less what I've done in here. This is not for showing up how good colorist I am, but there are many different ways of doing it. Many Filmlight has a fantastic way of addressing this. Resolve, as I said, you can do gamut mapping within Resolve, and this has been my approach to keep those colors and to keep that within control. I would address this in a shot-by-shot basis. Don't go mental, thinking that the whole production is going to have this. This is very easy to address in one by one. I'm going to show you the difference and why I prefer, for example, in this specific shot, why I prefer to do it manually, because the LMT from the Academy, it tends to desaturate some other colors, as you might see. And also, I'm going to go into full screen now, and hopefully you will all hear us, etc. Ta-da. So you will see here in the background how that blue background, even on the skin tones, it is a bit aggressive. So there's some people that they wouldn't like it for using on this specific situation, but I'm going to show you now another situation in which the difference between doing it manually or just using the standard LMT, it's very simple. So classic shot in New York, loads of neons in the background, and you can see how it looks that is somehow broken. Now I'm going to show you how let me just go. This will be with the LMT from the Academy, and this is with the full color gamut mapping that I've done within Resolve manually. Maybe there in the skin tones, we can see a little bit more of with this gamut mapping that has been done specifically for this shot. But this is easy to address if you know how to operate your color corrector, basically. So
I think that's crucial. I think speaking of the DPs, we've all had things where you could be very happy with the look of people and skin. That's what you're looking at a lot of the time. But it'll just be some weird things you have some scene in a club or police lights or something like that, and or just really saturated reds particularly seem to go, and they just kind of feel weird. And I think the scary thing is, like, I don't mind them. I look at them on the monitor on set through the EVF and go, oh, that looks weird. And the fear is that somehow you won't be able to fix it later. And kind of like used to the idea that on set you go, oh, that's a thing that happens, and I'm not sure about the monitors. But it's good to know that it can be fixed if you've got the right knowledge.
The best thing, and my best piece of advice, if I can put it that way, would be to do some testing on your prep with those neons. Go back to the studio or go back home if you are creating your own look. Work on it, create and embed it, put it within the LMT, which we can explain later on what it is and how it can be used. And this will be very easy to implement it within an LMT, and it's your own custom gamut mapping that is just addressing this mathematical inherent issue of ACES. But this is very, very easy to address with your colorist, or I know that there's many cinematographers that they like. You have Resolve or you have Daylight at home, and you can just create your LUTs and things like that. This could be very easily to be embedded within a film look. That is.
And I think this is a problem with digital cameras, particularly not necessarily with ACES, because I've had that problem on a film that wasn't done in ACES, and the blue lights on the police car just went apeshit. And it's always worth checking any fluorescent colors, high-vis jackets, yellow stripes on police cars, whether you're going through ACES or not, they're going to give you an issue on a digital camera.
Yeah, and I find myself, I'll be honest, like a few times, that it's taken me by surprise how extreme it's been, and sometimes you'll have a director on set being like, "You sure about that color?" And several times I've blustered through and been, I'm really embracing the strange digital tearing look of that. I'm leaning into that look, maybe we'll sort of blur it off later, and you just hope that some clever colorist or your DIT for your dailies will sort of tidy it up.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a scary problem to have.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm a massive fan of prep. Actually, I like considering myself a prep colorist, which is one of the things I did when I work at Sony. I just spent 5 years doing camera tests with hundreds of cinematographers that were coming at first to test the F65, and then the F55 became popular. So I was working at the DMPC, Digital Motion Picture Center in Penguin Studios, and we have a set and we have the post-production facility all within the same space, and we could just move from the set down to either a baseline or a result that we had there, and just see what we just filmed. So it was very easy, and then testing lenses and testing costume and things like that, seeing how they behave. Sometimes you cannot have full tests with all the costume and all the lighting and so on. But even if you are in the camera rental house, try to bring some of those lights into your testing room. And I would, especially if you know that you're going to have some of these neons on set and so on, test them. It's you need to see how they look alike. And
good advice when you're allowed the time. It's
that is correct. So
I think we've all done the shoots where your camera test is 2 hours in which you're in all the camera assistants way in the corner of a prep room trying to sort of best you get is decide what sort of filtration you're going to use. But yeah, I mean, it feels like some of this stuff. I mean, should we be looking at is this almost a role for a color scientist to be developing these kind of very technical transforms and tweaks, or would you say this is something that our DITs or our final colorists should be helping us with?
I would say that your DIT should be capable of helping you in this. Your colorist definitely, and if even yourself, if you know more or less how to open resolve and so on. What I've used for addressing this problem or in these two shots that I've done, it's out of the box effects from, I haven't even pressed any knobs or anything like that in doing complex things. It's just plugins. I've done a stack
Every DIT I work with is currently shaking their head frantically at the idea of me opening Resolve. No, I mean, I've been lucky enough to have people who've had all this stuff. But it's
I do know
interesting, what the best sort of working practice is, because we in prep as a DP, you're worrying about so many things, and you sort of you always feel. I certainly always feel guilty that I'm not paying full attention to every aspect. It's just impossible. Yeah. There's never enough time. And
I understand.
This particular one, of just the exact digital nature of the camera, and it feels like you're sort of kicking the problem down the road a little bit. And that's what's sort of fascinating about ACES in general, is the idea. Well, if we just don't screw it up throughout the whole process, then we have the most options possible. At the end as we did at the beginning.
Yeah, you will have exactly what you put in front of the lens. That's basically the idea behind ACES, is just to store.
And we're getting some really good questions coming in. I'm just going to save some of those because I'm keen for us to get onto the next part of your presentation, which is probably the more practical part. Is like, it's a sort of it's very much aimed at cinematographers, DPs, and so what do we need to change our working practice, and how much should we care? How can we, if you want to know tons, there's obviously tons of information out there, but if you just want to kind of have the passing grade in ACES, what should you be doing?
You don't need to change anything. Nothing at all. I mean, there's no extra equipment. You don't need more super duper monitors or anything like it. We're going to show you some more advanced ways of using ACES. For example, we're using for now SDR and HDR simultaneous on set and keeping the same look and blah, blah, blah. But ACES can be as simple or as complicated as you want to make it. But in terms of equipment, you need to change your practices. No, just take your light meter with you. That's the only thing you need. And actually, it's going to help you in the case that we're going to see later on, that you have different cameras within the same set. One of the things that ACES will give you, it's like you can trust your light meter for all of them.
Great.
Because a stop of light is the same stop of light once it's in ACES for camera A, for camera B, and for camera C. You don't need to be rating your light meter differently or anything like that. You could just go for a base one, and obviously respecting with some cameras that the native ISO that they've got and so on, but get the stop for that sensitivity and just trust on it. And we will show them, especially about exposure and so on, how easy it is with some of the footage that Geoff has provided us.
Great.
But the thing is that once you've established the base ISO, which is actually published on CML for all the cameras, you can totally trust your meter. And that's the way I prefer to work. I'm old. But actually, I find it easier and faster to use a meter than a waveform, because I've always got a meter in my hand. But if I'm pre-lighting, I'm not going to get an extra camera and a monitor and a waveform. So you have to have a workflow that works with a meter. And ACES makes it much easier.
That's the first thing I bought when I moved out of the studio I used to work in a post-production house, and I got a little bit bored of it, and I had to move into set. And the first thing I took with me was my own waveform monitor, because that's my best friend. And one of the things I always say is like, okay, a monitor can be wrongly calibrated, can be more contrast, could be, but a waveform monitor never lies. So I don't care. I don't need.
Well,
I don't need to.
Looking at the clock, guys,
my reaction of woo to that was garbage in, garbage out. And I've seen people try and use a waveform to judge exposure, not actually knowing what's being fed into it.
Well, that's a different story. Okay. So, but it doesn't lie off exactly. If you put shit in, you get shit out. But that's.
Or if you don't understand what you're feeding into it.
For sure. Shall we pop on to our next section of the keynote, the guide for cinematographers?
The guide for the cinematographers.
Guide for the cinematographers is just shoot the shit out of it. It'll be fine. You've got no changes to make.
Okay. Well, this was the slide we were using for the practical. By the way, copyright or these clips were provided by Almost Sobrino. Thank you very much. And now we move on to the second part. We tried from the beginning not to make these too techie. That's one of the reasons why I started just breaking my head and say like, okay, let's explain the history and the whole thing behind it, is why it is what it's doing and why it is doing it. So with the old photochemical process, using ACES, using ACES will become a second nature to you after you get familiar with it. So don't be afraid of it. Once you use it once or twice, it will become second nature to you. And the good thing, it works the same regardless if you have a different camera package for your next film or for your next project. So going back to if I need some specific equipment, by the way, ACES, it is implemented in every single color grading tool that I know, VFX tool that I know, on-set tools, live grade, pre-light. It's in there and it's for free. So, and it looks the same through all of them. That's another big point of it. So working in ACES, as I said, won't change anything that you need to do on set. It doesn't add extra kit or processes. It simply standardize the way a color managed workflow operates. The emphasis here is to identify any ACES-specific questions you need to ask upfront, like the one we were talking about, the neons. It's like, okay, am I gonna have this kind of lighting on set? How many cameras are we gonna have, and so on. So we're gonna try to guide you through and try to answer all of these questions that you might be asking upfront. So we're gonna see the transforms of ACES. We're going to explain the LMT and the creative power of this. This is the look part of ACES, which belongs to you, not to any camera manufacturer. It's yours and yours only. How ACES can be used in all kinds of productions, and I've seen it used from webinars. Unfortunately, this one I didn't manage to do like fully color managed, but for CGI, we said, for VR, for documentaries, music videos, large productions, small productions, ACES can be used for anything. Even just if you're going for fun to go to your camera rental house and just test your lenses. That's something that Geoff probably will explain a lot better in the next slides. And most of it, which is one of the main things in this seminar, are we doing how we archive ACES. So moving on to a little bit of explanation of ACES. The main issue that ACES aims to solve is consistency of appearance by standardizing image processing in a way which is available in a wide range of software. You can be sure that your vision will be maintained through the production. It is not a workflow. It's a framework that manages the color and file attributes of your existing workflow. Visit ACES Central for a list of titles that you can find, and you will see how many productions and all sort of productions have been made already in ACES. Meaning that whether your film ends up on the web, television, or on the big screen, it would look the way you intended. It doesn't add extra keys or processes, as we said. It just standardizes the workflow and how the operation of the workflow. An important point is that your DAT, if you have one, or if you are DATing yourself, you need to be familiar with the ACES pipeline. But you would not be doing anything you don't do normally. You'll be doing just the ACES way. All right. So moving on to ACES is an entire family of mathematical transforms. It's a standardized maths to do all these different transforms. For ease, we could say that they're similar to LUTs, but the ACES transforms, they work in what is called CTL, which is color transformation language, which has no limitations and doesn't offer any bandings or any of those problems that we can see loads of times with lookup tables. These transforms that we're going to see is the IDT, ADX, LMT, RRT, and the ODT. They all are the family of transforms that ACES offers. This is a very quick overview of how light is moved through an ACES work frame. But probably this kind of example or this kind of diagram would be more familiar to you. This is how every single color managed workflow looks alike. They have to look like this. You are getting cameras or images in, you try to manage them and to put them into a standardized or your choice of color space and light encoding. And from there, you will have another set of maths that will send onto different display technologies. The first one we will find is the IDT, or input device transform. All the materials through the input transform will already be in the same color space and more closely balanced. The IDT do not make all cameras look the same. This is an overall thing that is not going to make a GoPro look like a 100,000-pound camera. It will retain the latitude, noise characteristics, texture, etc. So it keeps the sensor as it is. It only standardizes the colors that is going to and the light, how it's been encoded. So it doesn't make all the cameras, it puts all the cameras in a very similar, in a very close ballpark. And we're going to move into another practical example. Unless we have, Ed, any questions so far while I'm changing to resolving here?
No, I think people are keen to see the example.
Right. So let me change your view here to, we're back to Resolve. We have here 4 cameras, Alexa, Venice, I think it's Monstro, and a Varicam. This is, we are using ACES out of the box. So this is all raw. By the way, when you're operating in Resolve, Resolve will take control of the raw divider. You don't need to apply an IDT within Resolve. It will do it automatically. It will divide those files in ACES. And probably it's going to be easier to go now to the full monitor, so you can see how they look alike. I'm going to open the full waveform monitor. By the way, this is courtesy of Tektronix, that they are helping us in quite a lot with their equipment, and we are equipment agnostic. So we have from Leader, Tektronix, and so on. But this is the one I got at home. And you will see here, especially in the vector scope, that the IDT is not making them all look the same. But once you are looking at them individually this way, you would see a slight difference between them. There's, these differences are very simple to address. And what I have created in here, we were talking about exposure, and I was saying that I'm a big fan of waveform monitors, and I'm probably the bundle of the Kodak gray chart that is in the center and a waveform monitor, and knowing what you're looking at, it's my favorite tool to have with me, because you can see in that center the big gray chip. That's the mid gray, or the 18% gray, which if it's exposed properly and we are in ACES, that should give us, in viewing in Red 709, that should give us around 18% of exposure. But what I have created here, it's a set of CDLs that you can either do it yourself with a live grid tool, or your DAT can do on the camera test if you have 2 different camera packages. So you know that they are perfectly balanced once you go into the dailies. And this will be a technical starting point, which I have. Let me just apply them to all of them and activate them in all of them. And I know that you're only seeing the waveform monitor, but now I'm going to be moving from one camera to another. So you will see that that gray chip and the whites, and so the latitude is being standardized, and we've balanced all of them out. This also relates to how they will intercut between them. This is the ACES, the basic look that we were talking about, Ed. This is the ACES look out of the box.
But it's not, you're sort of not really designed to be something that you would look at for longer than it would take to put your own kind of LMT on, correct?
Yeah, that is correct. But I'm going to reserve that for when we're talking about the LMT. I will probably go back to these same shots to add a look through all of them, and we can see actually how the LMT works for all of them as well, which is
and Geoff, this is kind of what we were talking about in the pre-show. When you're doing the camera tests, presumably this is the stage you're getting to when you're then comparing cameras, because you've got them into ACES through the IDT, then you've done the small correction that's required to match them up, and now comparing these, would you say you're comparing more the genuine differences between the cameras?
We start with absolutely no corrections at all, and just the basic IDTs, because we want to see what the inherent differences of the cameras are. And it's quite interesting that, as Pablo was saying, Kodak Grey Card is wonderful.
I love it.
It's so simple, so straightforward. It's my whole approach is keep it simple, because I am fairly stupid when it comes to this. And, people say, how did you learn all this? It's like, get it wrong, bang, get it wrong, bang,
yeah,
get it wrong, bang, And so I ended up working with very simple approaches. And so the idea is to look at exactly what the cameras do, and then find out how much it takes to correct them back to find out how much the differences are between the cameras.
Yeah.
And this is part of a test to see how they responded to tungsten and LED lights and daylight.
There is an important thing that I forgot to say, sorry, Geoff, about the IDT. The IDTs are provided by the manufacturers, by the way. They're not being made by the academy. Manufacturers, each manufacturer must provide their IDT.
And
it's not
some
like
are better than others.
And it's not like there's one per camera either. I understand there's dozens potentially for the Alexa, for example, and it depends on what white balance you're on. Possibly maybe what internal ND you're on. I don't know if that affects it. But
yes, there are IDT for Alexa. You have IDTs per ISO, per Kelvin, and per ND. They've done a ton of work, but that
you don't have to worry about that. That just your daily system will automatically grab the right one based on how you've shot it.
Yeah, because that is all baked in the metadata, either on a ProRes file or on a.
And all the tests are always done raw.
Mm-hmm.
So that's automatically picked up.
Yep.
If the manufacturers haven't got the IDT right, then that shows as well.
Indeed. And there is one camera in this test that we're not going to talk about it, Geoff.
Yeah. And there was one camera in tests we did 5 years ago where we actually had a prototype, and we managed to show the manufacturers before they released the camera where they had a real problem in the shadows, that their IDT was duff, and they fixed it.
Yeah.
So it's this is, you see the labels real. Real means tungsten. It's the only one that there is a fixed reference for.
Yeah. There's other manufacturers there that, for example, Sony applies. Now they have on ACES 1.2, they have implemented or included a specific one for Venice, but they used to have a common IDT for all of them. But it's only referring to how different manufacturers they encode internally the data. ARRI works internally in a very specific way, the ARRI way, and that means that you have baked in a different log-C, for example, for ISO, and also the way that the Kelvin is operating depending on the ISO that you're in. That's the reason why they need a different idea, I guess. In the case of Sony, I know that, for example, traditionally S-Log3 has always been native. The exposure index, when you were operating on an F55 or even on an S65, if you had an S-Log3 output on the SDI, it was never changing. So it was driving people crazy because they were coming from ARRI. And when you change the exposure index, the picture changes. When you do that on a traditionally on Venice, they've changed it, but when you do that on an F65 or an F55, it's always the same. And also, it's important to note those manufacturers that are capturing scene linear, that normally they say it on and that's basically what it means. Those are the easiest to go straight into ACES, because the only thing you're doing technically is the gamma mapping. The light encoding hasn't changed at all. It's 1-to-1 what the sensors. So all sensors are linear. They only see linear light. They capture photons.
The number of photons in the bucket kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. They do the same that your light meter does. It's a super advanced light meter. It's a magnet of photons. So it's counting how many photons. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 3 photons in this bucket. Okay, I take note, 3 photons in here, and that's my linear light. There's no log encodings that happens afterwards. But all sensors intrinsically, they are all linear. That's another reason why ACES, it's as its core, it's linear, because it's just trying to get straight into the sensor after the lens and straight what the sensor can see through a lens. So evaluation of lenses, 100% ACES, I will go, even though that you're not going to use your project afterwards in ACES. But if we're doing choosing which lenses are we going to use, the easiest way to see what the lens does, it's just forgetting about the look, inherent look that we have through manufacturers. You forget about it, and that's what the sensor can see. That's the lens. That's the filter. So Geoff was coming up as well with working with a prototype. And what happens if my camera does not have an IDT? And this is something, one of the things that as a cinematographer or project or whatever, you should ask: are my cameras rated? Do my cameras have IDTs? Because obviously, if they don't have an official IDT created by the manufacturer, it will be a little bit more complicated to put it in. And I put here some examples of that in large productions and in small productions we have to deal with, and those cameras, they don't have an official IDT. So if a camera doesn't have one, because if it is not provided by the manufacturer, custom IDTs can be created, but they need time and expertise. So you should plan beforehand and consult with your color supervisor, call it your DI facility, your DAT, your color supervisor, etc., and consult with that people. I'm planning on having this specific camera that I know that is not rated, and they will have a solution for it. Most of the big post-production houses that I know, they have tons of IDTs for cameras that are not rated, and they will share them with the VFX facility or the editor or whoever is involved in the process, because that's important. ACES as a framework is installed by default in all color correctors that I know. But if you have a specific non-listed IDT, you're going to need to share it with all of the people involved. So most of the time, a camera with no IDT will need to be reprocessed and create a submaster or a mezzanine file that once it's converted to ACES, that's the easiest way to move image from one facility to another. Instead of sending the IDT, which is a lookup table at the end of it, it can be tracking that can cause human error. So our recommendation would be to transcode those files into ACES and then provide them to all the manufacturers, and there's no IDT that you need to provide. So hope that helps and basically gives you a warning when you are prepping. Okay, because it happens all the time that they're trying to drop high-speed cameras and drones.
I think certainly, yeah. I mean, the Inspire, the DJI drone there, I think we've all had those pop. I actually own one of those, and they produce beautiful pictures, but it always feels slightly like the Wild West of how it's going to turn out. It has its own version of a kind of log space. It shoots raw in different ways. They change the firmware quite a lot. So it's always a slight stress for me, is, you know, when that stuff comes into the grade, how well is it going to match in? And certainly on our current project, that was the solution that the DIT and Technicolor and everyone came up with, was making sort of submasters and sorting it all out at that point. But yeah, lovely to think that it's unnoticeable, and also that as we get on to talking about the kind of the look that you might have put on creatively, that once you've sort of sorted this process out, that same look that you're quite happy with on your A camera is also going to appear on the on weird drones and little extra cameras and bits and pieces, and they're not just jumping out like a sore thumb as you look at dailies and early edits.
Yeah, they will intercut beautifully once you have treated them properly. So without further delay, that was the IDT. We have the Academy Density Exchange, or the ADX. We have two flavors of it. There are two ADX, ADX10 and ADX16, that basically relates to how your film was scanned, if it was scanned on 10-bit or if it was scanned on 16-bit. And it's basically doing Cine 2 linear, and it's a densitometric similar to the Cine to move it into ACES. So you can scan. So can I work on film and operate in an ACES framework? 100% yes. There's these two ADX10 and ADX16 that this will be your IDT for film. Let's put it that way. Okay, now we go into the part that I love the most, which is the look modification transform. This would be LMT. So applies a global per RRT. We will explain what the RRT is. Look into an ACES project. So this is your show look or your show lot. It's not a lot. So that's because I specifically name it as a show look. it's a very powerful, and in my opinion, especially for cinematographers, this is why you take control fully of the look. You're not depending on any camera, or you're not choosing a camera because of its look. You will generate, or you will decide which is the look that you want for all the cameras that are involved in the project. And also this look, you can move it into then your next project, even though that you have a different camera package for your next project. Another thing is agnostic of output. So this LMT will work in SDR, will work in HDR, will work in DCI for projection. It will work for VR. It will work for anything that you want to use it, because it's operating within the core of ACES.
And that's actually really important, because normally if you're using LUTs, they're working for a given color space.
Yeah, that is correct. I must note one thing here, that a lookup table cannot be, let me see how I rephrase it properly. A LUT cannot be transformed or converted into ACES. There are ways of doing it, but as you said, Geoff, they are always display referred. So it's always logged to 7 or 9. Yeah. So mathematically, you could, if you know how to do it, you could reverse engineer that LUT and put it into ACES, but it's always going to be 7 or 9. It's not going to be anything more or anything. It's not going to get any better. So it will not work the same for a high dynamic range or someone. It's going to be always limited to what it was built for.
It's also going to limit your color gamut, because one of the joys of working in HDR is the extra color you get, not the extra brightness.
I 100% agree with you, but I've done some jobs and in black and white in HDR, and it's insane. And probably many of you have seen Roma. As I was lucky enough to start in HDR like 6 years ago, before it was actually standardized and it was made public and so on. I had the first prototypes of the X300 monitor from Sony for testing and so on. I was doing at the time a black and white film done on the Monstro, on the black and white sensor, wonderful sensor by the way. And because I had it color managed, I decided to, okay, let's see how this looks. And Jesus Christ, it's a different thing. Just how it separates, the volume that it creates, just black and white. In HDR, it was just like, this is changing everything. And that is when I became really in love with the HDR. But as I said, color, especially dark skin tones, we have never seen them the way we're going to see them now in HDR with a wider gamut, because dark skin tones are out of gamut for 7 or 9, I'm afraid. The tonalities they have.
And if this all sounds interesting, we are planning, I think it's fair to say, another discussion with getting into HDR in great detail. So it is a huge topic, and we could waffle on for easily another couple of hours on that. So watch this space.
I think this
before we start on that one.
This will be for a second seminar that we've already been talking about it, because this topic is just for another 2 hours easily. So I'm going to go back to the keynote, but we're going to go back to Resolve, and I've tried to replicate the most famous look of them all, which we have seen in loads of LUT packages. Make your camera look like an Alexa. Okay, so let's make any camera look like an Alexa. It's so I've created my own LMT. Your colorist. This is not for showing off how good a colorist I am. I've actually did it quite pretty quickly. Let me just change the Alexa LMT. There we go. So in this example that I'm going to show now, I have replicated in the best way possible. There's one thing that I haven't managed to replicate exactly, and it's how it tracks blue, because that Alexa lookup table is wonderfully done, we must say. Ari really knows how to create looks and generate looks and so on. But basically, this is that LMT. It's I created a lookup table here. This is all the nodes that I had to create to replicate in a way, in the best way that I could. This look, I went for underexposure, normal exposure, and so it's -2, 0, and +2. And obviously what I was doing, it was, now let me just go for the full screen. Probably it's going to be easier for you to see this way. Monitor. Okay, what I'm doing now, I'm wiping with the Alexa lookup table, the original, and an LMT generated to emulate this LUT. I've known loads of cinematographers that I don't want to do ACES because I know how the X lookup table works, and I only want to use this X lookup table, and that's the only reason why I don't want to use ACES. This is not going to let me lead and control the contrast of my scene the way I know. It can be done. I mean, it's doable, very doable. Just or spend some time with your DAT or with your colorist. And the good thing is that you only have to do it once. After that, to just keep it there, and you can use it for the next project, for the other one, and regardless of the camera package. So you like this look, go for it. Just spend some time.
And it's really key to, I mean, people realize this now, but separating that look, which I think Ari called a K1S1 look. It's the sort of the default Alexa 709 look. That you know, as you say, they just really smashed it out the park with that one. It's tremendous. You could probably define exactly what it's doing that's so appealing, but certainly like a familiar film stock, DPs are used to that, and you know, in many senses, they in many ways, if you're starting with that and you know what it looks like with a certain white balance or in a certain lighting conditions and all those things, so it's kind of a shorthand we've all done projects where you just don't have the time to prep a complete custom look for the whole thing, like fast turnaround things. So being able to start from the point of view of an Alexa, like it's just good to have the option, because it's a shorthand. It's a picture speaks 1,000 words, and being able to say start with the Alexa and then start moving it, and then you know what you're saying is that can happen regardless of what camera you're actually shooting on.
100%. I mean, I don't want to be that brave, but even with a GoPro, if it had an IDT, you can make it look like it's not going to be an Alexa. Remember what I said. I mean, an IDT doesn't make all the cameras be the same, and
sure. So on. It can't change how the sensor operates and.
Correct, but the overall feel of midtones and obviously the gamut of the camera, the sensor, how much color is capturing, and so on. That's a different story.
Mm-hmm.
But as a ballpark, you've seen on the previous slide, make your GH5 look like an Alexa, okay, with the limitations of the actual GH5 sensor, which is a wonderful sensor as well, but it has it's not a 100,000-pound sensor.
Sure.
So. I'm going to move back to those multi-camera that we had before, and how can we make this? I'm going to reset this node, and let's apply this. So now I have that LMT on an Ari, on a Venice, on a Monstro, and on a Varicam. I'm going for this LUT because it's probably the most popular of them all. I've been complaining because for several X amount of years, everything looked the same because everybody was using the same LUT and using the same camera. And that's actually one of the reasons why I decided to jump out of the studio, because I was doing commercials mostly. Mm-hmm. And I ended up super bored of everybody wanting to just look the same. Let me look exactly the same as the other one. It's like, come on. What is the creativity in this? And these, by the way, you don't have to do it in pre-production. Probably your favorite camera rental house will be very keen of letting you space for a day on your own. You can borrow the camera, borrow some lenses. You can do something similar to what Geoff has done in here, something that you know how it behaves and how it bounces light and so on. Take all of that footage, either if you have a result at home or with get together, get a bottle of wine with your DIT, spend some time together, or with your favorite colorist, or I don't know. And just do it once. After that, you will take that LMT, and it's very easy, by the way, to wrap or to pack all of these into camera friendly, let's say, that you can load on the camera. So log C to Rec 709 with all of these LMT, IDT, all of them concatenated inside. That is very, very simple to do. Can be done from within Resolve when you export a lot with all of these transforms. It would create, if you have it on Rec 709, it will create a log C to Rec 709 lot. If you have it in HDR, it will create a log C to HDR flavor of the month, and on and on and on. So, for example, one of the things that we do at Misson when we're developing looks is I always develop an LMT. I don't go for any specific display referred one, and I will send you on a Google Drive or on a zip file the LMT for ACES and all the different camera packages. That's it takes me 5 minutes. Really, it's very simple. We have a full. I mean, LMTs is a complete new world. I can show you here like 50 something LMTs that we have from film scan that we've been working on, Kodaks. These are the ones that I would use more as a starting point with the cinematographer. Okay, I like the Velvia, the Fuji Velvia. So we start with that one, then we develop it. And that is Ed Moore's Velvia from now on. And
finally.
And you take it for, yeah. You want to have your signature film emulsion? Off you go. So this, in a nutshell, is the power of the LMT. It's
and obviously people are very familiar with the idea of creating a show LUT and things, and you stick that on your camera, and your monitor looks like that, and your dailies look like that if it's your DRT takes that through. Is there anything that the ACES framework enables you to do with the image that just a sort of a basic LUT can't? Like, I think people will be interested in the differences. I mean, so terminologically, the LMT is fulfilling the same thing that we used to from a show LUT, but there are advantages.
Well, as we were talking about before with Geoff, you have the ACES standard look. That's without any LMT. The LMT it's a modification within that standard look, just taking it a little bit a step farther. An LMT doesn't need to be complicated. You can really do it just without knowing anything about color grading, just pressing your knobs and just place it where you want it to be, and export LUT. Off you go.
When we were doing the tests, and Nick Shaw came and rescued me at one stage.
He's rescued me before too.
Put them together in lattice. I think he rescues everybody. But we were
rescued me too.
But we were doing them very simply.
Mastermind behind
we were doing them in pre-light, and it just works. It was so nice to be able to take test footage in, apply input and output transforms, generate an in-camera simulation of that. There are also other variations we did, low contrast versions, ones that include correction for the Kodak grayscale, so the whites and blacks and grays are where Kodak think they should be, which gives you much more of a film look, which is what I'm aiming for.
There's a practical benefit on set as well. I think if you have this whole system, in that I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe now if you're using, say, teradeck video transmitters, you can load a LUT into the receiver end of that. I don't think it just doesn't. So, and then you got a huge advantage that you can be sending your your look version to Video Village, but sometimes the focus puller doesn't want to see that version on their handset. So you've got a lot of control then. You're not always having to have multiple video outs from the camera to sort of suit everyone's needs.
Yeah, so we will explain a little bit on how to use it in ACES. As I said, you can make it as simple as you want. So if you're a one-person band, I'm not going to say man or women, just load it on your viewfinder and if you're used of just using aperture or the exposure by what you see on the monitor, once you get used to on that look that you've built and where gray should be and so on, just load it on your viewfinder and off you go. You're still recording raw or log or whatever, and then you're using it for your post. And the good thing is that your deliveries are independent. So that same look will be maintained through a high dynamic range delivery to a 7 or 9 delivery, a P3 delivery, or any other one. Because the principle of a color managements are maths in, maths out. Creativity happens in the center of it. That's because you will always see these diagrams that I said to you, this is probably the most famous or the user-friendly diagram of a color management. You're transforming stuff. That is mathematics, 100% mathematics. The LMT will be on that part of the look, and is your choice. I've also been in discussions. It's like, oh, when I was the 18, the DAT is taking the look out of the look is the cinematographer. I'm an interface between your brain or what you want to do and what we have in front of. As a colorist, as a DAT, as nothing. The ownership of the look is no one but the cinematographer. That's my principle, and
well, it's very kind of, the cinematographer's probably just stolen it from the other cinematographer, but I think I'll give you an example. I mean, we're going to talk about the output stuff, but as you've brought it up there, you know, I think every DP is really concerned that all of the various kind of stakeholders are looking at things that as they intend, and we've all been burnt or certainly skeptical by the kind of various daily streaming things. I know I have. You know, you have absolutely beautiful monitor on set with the DIT, looking at really happy, and then the executive producers and so on that are seeing your stuff, you know, for the first time, are often seeing it through a streaming platform or a monitor that you've got no idea. So like it seems to be hugely appealing to separate these output stages as well. And
in a 2012 Mac Pro uncalibrated.
Exactly, yeah. And I did a show where sort of a couple of weeks in, it was a show that had been running already, and we were doing our thing. It was all very kind of outdoors and dark and mysterious, and we were lighting it that way. And this new show LUT turned up sort of a couple of weeks in. They're like, oh, you should be using this, and DIT showed it to me in the van, and it was just made everything incredibly bright, incredibly washed out, and incredibly orange. We're like, this doesn't. No, that's what it's meant to look like. I've seen the show, and it doesn't look like this. And then, to cut a long story short, we eventually turned out that the reason this whole thing existed, and this was the LUT that was being applied to everything. So the offline editors saw this stuff. The directors, they were culling with this for months. And then, you know, certainly all the dailies and all that process was it had this look on, and it became down to the exec producer had a top floor office in a really shiny office building, and his monitor was right next to a really big window, and it wasn't a very good monitor, and by default the monitor was sort of very greeny and dark. So through a long series of Chinese
they did a show LUT and a calibration LUT all in one.
All in one. And
brilliant.
It was all designed to make the show look normal, anything look normal on this guy's awful monitor. And like that fills me with dread every time we do this process. So I think
every DP has a story like that.
Yeah, I mean, in every colorist probably has been this looks really bad. Like, okay, could you bring your laptop to us and we can calibrate it for you, or let's see, because I mean, we know that all of these is calibrated, or at least we've done our best to.
You just want to know if you're going to get fired as a DP. At least they're firing you for the thing you thought you were shooting.
Exactly.
That seems honourable.
Well, guys, I think we need to carry on, because we would like to do some Q&A at the end. So I'm gonna go back to the keynote, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Because we could be talking here for hours. I like this. Right. We're about to finish with all these transforms and so on. And this last part of the keynote should be quite fast. So the RRT, this is probably the most polemic part of ACES. it's been addressed as well for the further developments of ACES, especially for 2.0, maybe having different RRT, or you can a parametric RRT or something, because this applies a bit of a look. This could be the ACES look, because it's a core ACES transform that converts the scene referred image data that conforms the AP0 or the 702065, which is the name of the color space of ACES, to a display referred land, and resembles traditional film image rendering with an S-shaped curve. So it has a larger gamut and dynamic range that it is available now. So it's allowing you to render to any output device, even those that are not yet in existence. Then we have the ODT, or this is the output part of it, or the output device transform. Most of the time we will see them together as RRT and ODT, or this is the ACES output transform, which, as per the version of the 1.0 naming convention, this is the overall mapping from the standard scene referred ACES colorimetry to the output referred colorimetry of a specific device or family of devices. It is always the concatenation of the RRT and a specific output device transform. For the reason, the output transform is usually shortened as RRT plus ODT. You will see that naming of RRT plus ODT in most of the workflow diagrams that you can get from your DATs or etc. So that was the thick of it. That was all the namings and acronyms of ACES. We present you the whole family of ACES transforms. And now we're going to talk a little bit of ACES for all kinds of productions. So working in ACES, as we said, it would not change anything at all. You will only be doing it the ACES way. The ACES linear representation of the scene light matches what your light meter reads. So one stop of light, as we said, doubles the ACES value. So contrast ratios of the set translate directly into ACES. I cannot think, and this is one of the reasons why I went immediately to Geoff for this conversation. I cannot think in a better way to evaluate a specific camera package than in an agnostic way and in a standardized way, not depending or being distracted by the manufacturer's look or LUT. So please visit cinematography.net or reach to Geoff for some of his content, and you will learn a lot about how lights are behaving, how lenses are behaving, and so forth. Geoff, is anything that you would like to add on this bit?
Not really. I mean, as I've said it basically already, that the standards, I just love standards because you know where you are, and the whole thing.
I like standards because standards are there to be broken.
Well,
And,
yes,
you're within a standard, but then you do whatever the hell you want. That's the beauty of it.
But the important thing is to have a clear starting point.
Indeed.
Where you can all say, this is what the cameraman shot. Before we started grading it, before we started whatever. And it's that base thing that's vital. And ACES really helps that.
Yeah.
And it helps with the difference between cameras. Because if you look at some of the tests, you'll see the Kodak stress test.
I've got some of them. I've got the lighting ones. You want me to move into that timeline? We have Kodak, we have, I think, Alexa and FX9.
Well, the CML stress test chart is there to break cameras. It's designed to hurt them. It's not designed for matching. It's not designed to make them look nice. It's to find out where they fall apart. And you'll find that all the cameras have trouble dealing with that top row. Yeah.
I got here the latest one. You told me that you did this nearly from the hospital.
Yeah, well, you can hear my throat. That's throat cancer, or the reaction or two. And yes, this was done over Facebook and email. I set it all up, thinking I was going to hospital after this. And they decided the tumor was growing too fast, and they wanted me in straight away.
Yeah.
So this was all done by remote control. But Adam Wilt and Mick Van Rossum were just genius. They handled it all. It was prepared for 8 months in advance. There's pages and pages of prep for it.
Yeah.
Everyone thinks we're going to just throw these together. The tests get the backup, the setting them up is enormous.
I've only chosen 2 lights because
Yeah.
there's an insane amount of lights that you've tested
Yeah, I know.
on this. But
13
for
lights
ease
and
of this
8
presentation,
cameras.
yeah, exactly, and cameras, and in this case, I've chosen 2 lights and 3 cameras. So
And daylight and tungsten.
in this case, I'll just keep them all in. Sorry, I just wanted to simplify it a lot. So I went for an Aladdin and a Sky panel, which is probably the most used one. So we have film.
If you look at the lower right chart, the top row there is the one that breaks cameras. When DSC made the chart for me, I asked them to make them as saturated as they could be.
Yeah.
And they went, well, what color space are you going to look at? You know, no, guys, forget color space.
Yeah.
I want to break the cameras. I want the worst colors you can create for the camera.
By the way, he's talking. I'm going to make a zoom into it if I can. Give me the other way.
And so that's what they did for me. And then you get 75%, 50%, and 25% saturation.
That's brilliant. And
that
2 big patches
right,
of gray.
And you see within the white and within the black, there's a little square that's a third of a stop different to the rest.
Yeah, let me drop the exposure down.
Oh, yeah.
There you go.
So, and that shows you where you very clearly, when you lose that little square, that's where your limit is.
I like they've put a disclaimer on the charts. Do not use this to align cameras.
They were terrified people were going to try and blame them for the cameras looking weird with these charts. You know, that top left red square basically buggers nearly every camera.
Yeah, and I can tell in probably a private conversation, but that specific chart helped me a lot to design the look of a very famous camera right now, because I use a lot of your material to work on it and to create
it's out there for people. I mean, that's what it's for.
And he was breaking it very, very fast. So that's one of the reasons why I just love getting your material.
I always find it funny, and I'm going to get grief for this, but I always find it funny that the camera that works worst with that red chip is a red camera. So, you know.
Yeah.
So I reckon, so guys, I'm just being time conscious here. I think we promised people we'd try and wrap up maybe in about the next 15-20 minutes. So I wonder if we should talk a bit about Archival and then open the floor up to some of the questions that have been coming through.
Sure, I can jump on because we were also with our 20-minute delay, which is
I included that, I'm afraid.
We included that, damn it. Okay, so let's move into the archival point, which is what we were talking about. These previous slides is basically how ACES operates in different workflows, what happens to your DI, to your DIT, what it's doing, dailies, and what happens on the DI. Basically, is repeating the same. It works the same way in all of them. But this is an important thing. What happens after you've signed up or you're locked the color grade? As we know, producers, they tend to sometimes to defer the consideration of the long-term store of archiving to the work to simply later. In the film era, archiving was largely a matter of storing the finished film negative, outtakes, and intermediates in a suitable environment. However, with the evolution of digital capture and processing, archiving has become more complex with several major considerations. Two issues shared by all business generating valuable digital records are that the digital files and physical data storage medium, that is, how will data files will be retrieved and correctly interpreted in the future, as perpetual advances in technologies can render previous stored materials unrecoverable. Basically, this tries to say that if you have archived your Rec 79 master out, and a super duper HDR comes in 25 years, it's not going to get any better. You could try to remaster it, you could try to crank it up and so on, but that's your archive, that's your master, that's it. Archiving in ACES, in the other hand, as archives it independently to any display technology available now and in the future, will protect it. In addition to improving the color management, ACES establishes non-quality archive-ready masters that can confirm the creator's visual intent regardless of changes in display standards of presentation formats over time. For finished films, ACES provides a semi-standardized archiving methodology that ensures their creator's visual intent is preserved. Any remastering for future formats can refer to the original images, removing the need for guesswork. Images are saved in a constrained version of the OpenEXR file format, which is the main image container for ACES as an archive and to move files from between facilities and so on. And then we have, it's been now introduced in the ACES 1.2. We have the ACES metadata file, or AMF, which is a sidecar XML file intended to exchange the metadata required to recreate any ACES viewing pipeline. Individual ACES container files can be wrapped together into an MXF file as AP0 2065 and joined with other packaging metadata to create what is called the IMF, or interoperable master format. I never managed to say that properly, which that is the actual master and archive. That's what you will be providing to your Amazon, to Netflix, and so on. That's what they want. Talking about the AMF, it's surprisingly powerful. It can contain the history of the transforms, if you've changed the LMT at some point, the CDLs from SED. It's all metadata, which means that it's non-destructive. So it's just recreating how files were created and how files were viewed. So that includes as well the ODT that you use on doing your color correction for creation of the look. And this file lives on set. Hopefully, in the future, we will see as well cameras generating these AMFs together with the raw file that will tell you how you were viewing on the viewfinder. That will contain, okay, I'm an ACES file and I've been seen this way. I contain a CDL that is one step up, one step down, or a white balance correction or whatever. And I was viewed in 7 or 9. That goes back onto the dailies. The dailies are generating HDR deliverables and SDR deliverables. So they will create, or they will update this metadata file, and they will say, okay, and the dailies, by the way, they were created with this same CDL, same LMT, and this ODT. So it's an archive of all the viewing conditions and etc.
I've been working on a project now for 2.5 years, which is an ACES case study, an academy case study.
This one that I'm talking, that I just moved on to.
Ah. Hang on, I'm on the wrong screen. In fact, yes, The Troop with Marcus Dilliston. And this has been amazing for me because I'm there to preserve the original cinematographer's intent, as he's no longer with us. And it's been fascinating to work through this process and to make sure that we have an archive that can be used in future that keeps everything that was there originally and with the original intent. And as I say, it's been a project that's been running 2.5 years now, because the more we do in it, the more we find out.
One of the other things that archiving in ACES, it's not going to get rid of remasters, but I think this should be more considered trim passes than a full remastering.
Absolutely.
Which, especially now with the advent of HDR, we're going to see now a ton of classic films remastered for HDR.
And that was the idea behind this. A 20-year-old film, scan it, do HDR versions, SDR versions, a new film print.
Yeah, but then we,
of course, EXR masters.
Then we can get into the philosophical conversation. If it's like, especially if the cinematography is not live anymore, was he never intended to be viewed in HDR because he never knew about HDR. So respecting that that approach as well, but that's a complete different conversation.
Well, maybe
probably.
that's something we can touch on in the HDR discussion about repurposing.
Yeah, that's been one of the hardest things in archiving, knowing what the original cinematographer didn't like,
yeah,
and resisting doing something because I love it, but I knew he wouldn't like it.
We could have talked to the academy and been able to in the that AMF to be able to block ODTs. So my film is never going to be seen in.
Yeah.
Well, guys, I think that's a good bit on archiving, which is another huge subject that we don't often have to worry about. I just want to sort of start heading towards wrapping up and some questions. I had a question here. Well, first of all, I just wondered, Pablo, if you just pop up the appendix slide very shortly, which is your next sort of starting point as a DP. ACES, the Academy, have put out a really handy PDF that just kind of gives you an overview if we've rushed. Well, we certainly haven't rushed through anything, but we've covered a lot of subjects in quite technical detail. So there's a good chance to look at stuff there. Some of the questions I've seen coming in, one from Shabir saying, ask Pablo if there's a way to bring in the LUTs from something like the ARRI LUT library to work within ACES. Curious to know if there's a way to use them for ARRI workflows.
Well, as I said, I've already built LUT shouldn't be reverse engineered and put into ACES because it's they're created as display referred. So that LUT is always going to be Rec 79 or PQ, because I know that now you have all the LUTs or the flavors of for ARRI as well for PQ and so on.
Yep.
I would address it from scratch.
Yep.
If you have a good eye or a good color with you or your DAT, is very easy to load your favorite LUT, create a still, and then by using wipe mode, trying to replicate it, as I said, spending a little bit of time. I wouldn't do it. I mean, you can do it in pre-production.
Sure.
But ideally, you can do this, as I said, over a glass of wine or tea, and just spend some time and just replicate it from scratch with your colorist or your DAT. In this case, that would be the best way to replicate that look.
And lots of people asking about how to get the LUT into, say, the EVF of the camera. Like, would you need to know? Would you have to have an ODT for the specific EVF?
EVFs are, there's some of them that are high dynamic range now, HDR. I think for the one from Panavision, they have an HDR one. But EVFs are 7 or 9. So that's the LUT you need. That's the package that you need. It will go from camera log to Rec 7 or 9. That's the one you load.
The combination ones we did, which loaded in camera, were all to 709. But it's really easy to do them to another output.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of ACES.
Yeah.
As
no
you
hassle
said,
at all.
As you said, with Daylight, with the free version of Resolve, if you know a little bit more, Lattice is a super powerful tool to concatenate all of these things. I use it constantly. So it's, if you know what you're doing, it's simple. It's easy to do.
And everything you need to do it is on ACES Central.
Exactly. That's another thing that I was going to say, that remember that ACES is a non-profit organization to start with. All of these, everybody that is working on it, we're doing it for free. We're giving our time. There's top people from eFilm to Sony Pictures, Disney, etc. And it's an open community. So go to ACES Central. All the meetings that we are having as well, they're all recorded, they're all public. You can attend the meetings as well. You can interact. You can send your questions or your suggestions, and it's an ongoing.
I'll take a couple more questions before we wrap up. Then Mark's saying, I understood that the Resolve ACES look different from the Baselight, etc. IDTs. I know that shouldn't be the case. The manufacturers are making the IDTs, but I just wanted to make sure all the software is working the same way.
Aha. That is a specific thing with Filmlight, which is on the RRT. Filmlight, they have what they call the DRT, which is the display render transform.
Right.
That comes by default, the Filmlight look.
So Filmlight, obviously, for those who don't know, is a company that makes Baselight.
Correct. So when you go to the color journey, which is what is the name of the page within or Daylight or Filmlight, any Filmlight, when you go to the color journey, ensure that the DRT is the Academy one.
Yeah.
It needs to say the RRT, and then it will match any other software.
They actually have quite a range of RRT equivalents in.
It's
Filmlight.
it's very, very smart. But I've already addressed it with them that by default, if you're in ACES, it should load the Academy RRT.
Yeah.
Okay, so slight thing there. Daraj is asking, are CDL created according to camera specifics and how CDL and LMTs are correlatable?
CDLs within ACES will not be camera related. They're agnostic. And the LMT should be agnostic as well, because it's within the core of ACES. So you could generate, I mean, when you create, if it's a technical CDL, for example, we use CDLs to match sensors because it's physically impossible, even within the same manufacturer, to generate two sensors that are exactly the same. There's always a slight differences between two camera bodies. So we've done it as well for lenses. I mean, even though that lenses are super high quality, et cetera, especially when you have a very heavy VFX show, I have spent a lot of time on camera rental houses just to generate CDLs per lens that neutralizes the slight tint differences that you might have between 250 mils, for example. But those are technical CDLs. If it's a creative CDL that you're increasing contrast, applying a bit of saturation or something, that's camera agnostic. So
fantastic. I'll do Simon's question here. If the Archive AXR has the grade from, say, Baselight Resolve burned, processed in, and exported for Archive as ACES, what use is the CDL and any other transform pre-grade in the AMF? He read out loud, understanding half the words.
That should be, but the AMF is a carrier. It's an XML that will go with it. Once you render your project with the color grade, etc., it will have a CDL, but it will have all the other nodes that your colorist is applying, all the vignettes, all of that. It's those are localized transforms that cannot be archived as metadata. So you cannot burn that as a lot. Basically, a lookup table, for example, it's changing just pixels, but you cannot do localized selections for it. You cannot do a mask or a face, for example. But what you archive as an OpenEXR is once you finish the color grade, the full color grade, you render the ungraded and you render the graded version. And that goes onto the IMF, which is that MXF that will contain all of them. It contains as well all the subtitles, all the audio tracks, all the assets that...
Yeah, we're archiving a lot more than just a HD cam tape on the shelf these days. I
think you have to bear in mind that a CDL is really quite basic.
Yes, it's 9 controls what you got.
Yeah.
Something that I would love you to touch on slightly more as well is Francesco asks, did Pablo, this is great, which I agree with. Can you please explain the concept of scene referred and why ACES is not really scene referred? Well,
it depends on which part of ACES you are in. That's the first part of ACES is scene referred. A scene referred relates to the light that was put in front of the sensor after going through the lens, obviously. That is what we consider scene referred. There are some of transforms, for example, CDLs for balancing, as we said, a lens should be on the scene referred part of the correction or on the work frame. Once you are already creating and judging through a monitor, that is what we call the display refer part of it. You're taking decisions by looking at a specific monitor that you will be using an ODT, a specific ODT for that monitor that you're using. So it's two parts. I can bring back the diagram that actually explains it. Let me just come back to here. There you go. So scene referred is physical light, is Newton. Display referred is perceptual. That, I mean, we're simplifying it a lot, but it will be on the perceptual part of it, which is basically, that means that you're taking the judgment, your judgments and your decisions are once you are looking at those pictures. For example, we were talking about this neon fix. The neon fix is on the display referred part of it, because it's the translation between the scene referred part and the display referred part.
Hopefully that makes sense, Francesco. And as Pablo was saying, like, this is not specific to ACES. Like, any image pipeline would have to, just by definition, include these, right? Because you have at one end physics, and then at some point you go through eyes into a brain, and then you're looking at the display referred.
That is correct. These are basics of color science and color management. There's always a scene referred part of the image. So how the image travels through the workflow. On cameras, for example, that on traditional broadcast cameras, that what you see is what you get. The scene referred part, you never see it. It happens within the camera head.
Fantastic. So, brilliant. Well, we've got the link there to the quick start guide from ACES. ACEScentral.com, really helpful resource for looking at some more of this stuff. I'll get Pablo to chuck that slide up. And Steve there from ACES Central saying, please let us know if you've used ACES in a finished show. Let's keep spreading the word, would be very helpful. And Pablo, if people have sort of been interested in the broader kind of color science stuff here, want to get into CIA standard observers and referred scene values and all that kind of stuff, what would you say would be, if you're a DP just wanting to get a bit more nerdy, what would be the first point of call to understand more of this?
Oof, that is a complicated. I mean, there is a lot in internet, but you can get very lost as well. I would be very careful in who you follow and who you take as a reference between, especially in the internet world and the world of YouTube. I've had many mentors that had introduced me into and made me passionate about this. And I've never been trained. Actually, I'm an architect. By trade, I studied architecture in uni. I ended up here by accident. In a way, I like to explain it that way. I own everything to Rafa Roche, which is the DP that discovered me, let's say, and took me out of and taught me everything that I know. Knowledge for color science, it depends how deep you want to get and what's your level that you're starting. I guess
what's the starting point? Yeah, like who do you follow on Twitter? Where would you start to just learn?
No, you go to a Charles Poynton website.
Charles Poynton. It's been the go-to for most of the last 5 years for me. Yeah. But I was already advanced because it's not an easy one. But you can find. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, I could certainly recommend Charles Poynton's got a fantastic course on fxphd.com. That would be my advice. Look at that as a starting point. Just one final thing, I guess, just on ACES in general is Sam McCurdy's asking, what differentiates or makes ACES sort of more significant from any other pipeline that they could choose to set up, himself?
Standards.
And interoperability. Damn it. Basically, you can move it from any software to one software to another, and it would look the same. You don't need to be sending complicated bundles of lookup tables. These are the lookup tables that I'm using for the input. These are the lookup tables that I'm using for the outputs, etc., etc. So it's ease of use, and it's not doing anything better or worse than a really well-made color management. Yeah, it's a really well-made color management, and it's standardized.
Well, it's a framework, it's standards, it's got lots going for it, and hopefully that's given you a little bit of an introduction to it. I think we should probably wrap it up there, guys. What do you think? Yeah. We've blown on
plug for ACES Central again.
Plug for ACES Central, absolutely. That's a really good starting point. And I see they've got they've got a YouTube channel as well with lots more content you can check out. So until next time, hopefully we'll be back to talk about HDR soon. Thanks very much, Geoff. Thanks very much, Pablo. And thanks to Mission Digital for putting this all together.
Thank you very much, Ed, for leading this awesome job. And see you next time.